You're watching Sky News Tonight. It is just over a week since Andrea Leadsom emerged from the shadows of fellow Leave campaigners Boris Johnson and Michael Gove to unexpectedly run for Prime Minister, an experience which she says has left her shattered. But the fallout from the EU referendum vote hasn't just been limited to the Tory party. Labour too has seen its shadow cabinet collapse amidst a couple of whirlwind weeks in politics. Let's recap on the key events now. First, on the Sunday after the referendum, we saw pressure on the Labour leader, with calls for him to resign over his lacklustre approach to the referendum, with one by one almost all of his shadow cabinet resigning. But it wasn't long until the Conservative Party was thrown into disarray. Just moments before nominations closed, Boris Johnson announced he was not going to run. Next up, it was his fellow Brexit campaigner Nigel Farage who announced that he would be standing down as leader of UKIP, claiming his political ambition had been achieved. Tuesday the 5th of July, the first of two secret ballots of Conservative MPs was held as part of the process to whittle the field down to two. Liam Fox came last and was eliminated. Stephen Crabb came fourth and dropped out. Both gave their backing to Theresa May. Then all attention turned to talk of a second female Prime Minister after Michael Gove was eliminated from the race in the next round of voting. Accusations that Mrs Leadsom lied about her CV and controversial comments on motherhood may have led to her decision to pull out of the race, leaving Mrs May the only remaining candidate. I'm joined now by Baroness Patience Wheatcroft, who is the former editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal Europe, and Phillip Blond, who is the former policy advisor to David Cameron. So, Theresa May is now leader of the Conservative Party, Prime Minister designate, to be confirmed as Prime Minister on Wednesday. What kind of Prime Minister will she make, Baroness Wheatcroft?
I think she'll be the Prime Minister we need, not because she's a woman, but because she's the best person for the job. She's very determined. She's very reasonable. She will make the right decisions for the country, and I'm so relieved.
How do you think she'll compare to David Cameron's premiership, Phillip Blond?
Well, I would like to contrast the speech Theresa made this morning. A radical one nation Conservative Party, workers and consumers represented on boards, and industrial policy. We haven't heard that in many a year. New bond offers by the Treasury for infrastructure. And I contrast that with David Cameron, who, when he entered on his premiership, had a really radical vision. And arguably, I think, the great tragedy of Cameron is that in the end, his radical social agenda played second fiddle to George Osborne's austerity. I think it's very, very important for Theresa May that she follows through this agenda, that she becomes a truly transformative Conservative Prime Minister, because we haven't really had one and we desperately need one. Those who voted for Brexit, and there are multiple reasons, but chief amongst them was, first of all, economic disenfranchisement on a massive scale, but also cultural insecurity. They felt they were no longer at home in their own country, and their own country wasn't looking after them. And I think Theresa should be judged by the speech she gave this morning, that I think was visionary. And I just hope she doesn't strike too cautious a tack and end up being absorbed by all the difficult sort of impediments of office.
What kind of a vision was it, though, Phillip Blond? I mean, some were suggesting as she was speaking that she'd parked her tanks on Ed Miliband's lawn, others making comparisons with Ted Heath. Where was she positioning herself?
Well, from what I know of Theresa, and I wouldn't claim to know her particularly well, but you know, we have met and talked about various things. She's highly intelligent, one of the most intelligent politicians I've ever spoken to. And I think she's deeply moved by questions of social justice. I mean, I believed her in her speech this morning. So I would really like her to set a high bar for herself. And I think, you know, think of Disraeli, think of somebody transformative. She needs to do for the northern working class what Mrs Thatcher did for the southern working class. And she needs to be really radical and transformative, because otherwise, if she just tries to tack, it won't be enough, I think, to win the Conservatives a majority in 2020. They still only have a very small majority, and it could easily become a minority. So that's what she has to play for.
And Patience Wheatcroft, she seems to be ruling out a snap general election. At least her campaign manager, Chris Grayling, was adamant about that. But, I mean, might she be tempted, given the state that Labour is in right now, to rule out any questions over mandate?
No, I don't think so. She's also said that she doesn't want to go for a speedy election. I think that Philip's absolutely right. When Cameron came to prominence, he was talking about healing the broken society, which clearly needed to be done, and it was an admirable objective. But as so often happens, circumstances got in the way, and the broken society is still broken.
Yes.
And Mrs. May is talking about doing things that will help to heal that broken society. Now, I think, as Phillip suggested, that it was the victims of injustice, social injustice, who voted for exit from Europe, not because they particularly want out of Europe, because they wanted to protest. They feel disadvantaged. And I do hope now that Mrs. May is going to be Prime Minister, she'll take on board the fact that we are not all Brexiteers now.
And she wasn't a Brexiteer, but does she need to surround herself with Brexiteers in her cabinet in order to carry out the task that she has to extract us from the European Union?
No, I don't think she does. And I think she has to be very aware of the fact that 48% of the country voted Remain.
52% though, a majority did vote to leave.
Yes, but hang on, because a majority of young people whose future we're playing with actually voted Remain. Of those who voted come out, many are already expressing their regret. And of course, they voted on the basis of so many untruths. So I think she has to be very balanced in how she negotiates the next few stages. And I understand why she's saying that this is the mandate and she feels obliged to follow it through. I would say that it's not a very convincing mandate, and we do need to be clear before pressing the button on Article 50 that this is what the country really wants. Because once that button is pressed, there's no going back.
Philip Blond, I mean, what about the Secretary of State for Brexit and those around her? Who does she need to put in those roles?
Well, I think she'll do the obvious thing and pick a very competent Brexiteer to lead that up. But I think what she has to do is, she's a politician who's got where she has by waging a defensive campaign. She's controlled, she's defensive. But now she's leader, she's got to be expansive and persuasive. And she is our own woman.
She's trying to strike an optimistic and positive tone, which was actually more what we'd been hearing from Andrea Leadsom in the previous days, wasn't it? And today she was setting out that we need to be positive and optimistic about our future outside of the EU.
The way I agree, but the way she does that is she speaks, as Patience has quite rightly said, she needs to speak to those who are economically excluded from the goods of our society. She needs to do something radical. Appoint Stephen Crabb as Chancellor. She doesn't want to be beholden to another austerity Chancellor who will strangle her vision of social reform at birth. She's her own woman. I would like to see her sit down, have a glass of water and think, goodness, let me be expansive. Let me actually appoint people who are radical social justice reformers. And they go across the party. They go from Remainers to Brexiteers. And I think if she goes the social justice route, she'll speak to those who voted to leave the European Union. And that way I think she'll keep faith with everybody, really.
And what about Andrea Leadsom? Is there a role for her in reward for falling on her sword?
I don't think there should be. I'm very wary of somebody who apparently overeggs their CV to the extent of a massive souffle. I don't think that that's the sort of route into public life that should be rewarded. I don't think her judgment has been seen to be of the best. So, no, I don't think she should be rewarded.
And what about George Osborne, who's off to the United States to press the flesh and push the case for trade deals between Britain and the United States? What about him?
Well, if you look at the route that Cameron and Osborne have followed, it was not the one that was originally articulated about healing the broken society, but circumstances got in the way. 2008 came along and changed everything. And if one considers where this country is now, after being steered through the crisis by Cameron and Osborne, I think they've done a remarkable job. We're better placed than most countries now.
Despite Osborne having to break all three of his fiscal rules.
Yes, despite that. these were very difficult times, and the country has come through in much better shape than most. So I think if George Osborne will work with Theresa May, that would be for the benefit of all of us.
Phillip Blond?
I would be a little more critical in my judgment.
You want a fresh start?
Well, I think there needs to be a fresh start. Look, if Cameron had, the crisis was in 2008, he was elected in 2010. I always felt that he just lacked the persistence to follow through with his own social justice vision, and so betrayed it. And I think that was a terrible tragedy. And I think he betrayed it because he had a very powerful mind as Chancellor that was wedded on another course. George Osborne came late, too late to the party with the Northern Powerhouse that I think was absolutely the right idea, and we at Res Publica have long championed that. But I think she needs a fresh start, and I think Osborne is too powerful and also too tarnished by recent events. I think he's still a deeply talented politician, but I think time on the backbenchers and a new role actually would, I think, fit everyone, be far more suitable for the party and for all the figures involved.
Phillip Blond, Baroness, Patience Wheatcroft, that's all we've got time for, but thank you both very much indeed.